A 2016 graduate of the Starmark Academy School for Dog Trainers, Antonio has been training and educating both dogs and humans for the past 7 years. After his schooling, he turned his passion for helping dogs and coaching people into a successful profession. As a rewards-based, balanced dog trainer, Antonio seeks to improve the relationship between owners and their dogs. He stands out from other trainers with his signature approach on leadership, a higher value placed on meaningful engagement with our dogs, and also from deliberately seeing things from the dog's perspective. Antonio has been featured on both local and national news outlets for his expert opinion and tips on dog training, and has amassed close to 1.5 million followers across his social media platforms. Welcome, Antonio. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Katie. It's good to see you. Nice to see you too, Penny.
Thank you. Good to welcome you on. I can't wait to talk about what we're going to discuss today.
Same.
We have not had anyone, we haven't had anyone talking about what you're about to talk about. So, and I know from Penny, this is something she is so passionate about on the welfare side. So this is just, and I'm selfishly so excited to talk about dog training because this is something I know almost nothing about except for my failures within the last year of adopting my puppy. So hopefully this is helpful for everyone because I'm going to come at you with a lot of real world questions if that's okay.
Yes, so, absolutely.
Can you start just by kind of giving us a background on you and your philosophy and kind of what you do?
Yeah. So, man, that's always such a broad question. I'm like, okay, what do? I help people understand their dogs and help them see things from their dog's perspective. I'm really a relationship-based dog trainer. Obviously, people have problems with their dogs that they want fixed immediately, but it's important to take a deeper look at things that we can adjust in the relationship with the people that have these dogs. And so that's my main focus, and from there I deal with all types of issues: fear, aggression, problem behaviors like jumping, barking, and then basic obedience. So I go to my clients, I usually work with them one-on-one, and I also offer a lot of online courses and Zoom calls and things like that.
Beautiful. What makes you different than other dog trainers? I mean, it sounds like that relational piece. I'm guessing not everyone comes at it from that standpoint.
Yeah, agreed. I think that we are coming from an age of looking at dogs like they need to obey us just because. And we're stepping into a new understanding of that dogs are emotional beings, and they obviously there's limitations to their emotional capacity, but it's important to recognize that and see that they have their own quirks and personalities and things like that. And I think what separates me is my ability to not only just pivot within my training plans and my sessions based on what I'm seeing and what the dog is telling me and what my clients are telling me, but also my ability to break things down for people in a way that they understand what's going on and that they can relate to it, so they are more inclined to make the changes that they need to make for their dogs. This is the Pet and Parent, right? We're Pet and Parent Longevity. This is a longevity summit. Someone might be saying, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so into this, but wait a second. What in the world does this have to do with longevity? Can you tie that in for us? Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, look at it this way, right? I've worked with people that are stressed, so stressed because they can't even take their dog outside on a walk, because and as much as their dog needs exercise because they're an athletic dog with lots of energy, when they bring their dog outside, their dog is going crazy. And so they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they feel like they failed their dog. And so they hide from their responsibilities of taking their dog out. Meanwhile, in the house, the dog is going crazy because they need to get outside and they need fresh air and all these things. So there's a lot of stress factors for both owners and the dogs, and understanding how to manage those situations and alleviate some of that stress will not only help us live longer, but it'll help our dogs live longer as well. And I've had clients that I've had clients whose family members wouldn't come over any longer because of the behavior of the dogs. And so I've literally helped people's families reunite. And that we all know how important family is in our social aspect to health and long.
that's how it ties in, because dogs are our lives. And if they're stressing us out and we're stressed, then they're stressed. And it's this vicious circle that we need to get out of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that social connection exists on a deeper level, really, when you have a pet, because not only are you creating a bond with another species and improving your communication and your feelings of love and affection and trust and cooperative working through life together thing, but your pets help you meet other people. You're interacting more when you're going out to the dog park, when you're going in public. This, everyone loves a dog, right? Who doesn't run up and go, oh, can I say hi to your dog? At least I always do that, right? But it's a great socialization tool for the dog as well, because of course they need to meet lots of different other dogs of different sizes, shapes, breeds, the whole thing. And they need to meet other people and get comfortable with other people and familiar with those who are outside their family, their tribe, to say, okay, you're a friend too. I don't have to have my stress levels go up. And so there's always that dog looking to the human. How's the human responding? I'll mimic and mirror that because that's the guidance that I'm getting. And equally, when we're covered in our stress and we're bristling with anxiety or with frustration or whatever else, our pets mimic that straight away as well. And so now they're on their front toes going, worrying about, do I need to bite somebody? Do I need to go protect my dad here or whatever else? So the relational aspect to what you're doing with training to actually teach a behavior, because let's work out what training is, right? Training can have some negative connotations sometimes when you think of the ringmaster at the circus with the whip and the chair, and it's like, if you don't do the scary thing and jump through the hoop of fire, you're going to get lashed, really bad pictures of training in people's heads sometimes. But training is teaching. It's a communication between one to another to convey some information so someone else can have a better life, so it's a really positive thing. So I love that you're bringing a second layer to this of the relationship as well as the learning component. So I just wanted to, I don't know, even say that. I don't really have a question right now, but that was where I wanted to endorse what you're doing. Because there's a lot of bad trainers out there, right? Let's be real. There's a lot of unqualified backyarders, rough guys, not qualified, not treating the animal kindly, just trying to get a quick result and punishing. And maybe that's where we can go for 1 second, because punishment is obviously a deterrent. We're not going to be inspired to learn when we're feeling crushed in our spirit, when we're feeling like we're afraid of our teacher. So can you speak for a minute about the methods that you use that allow the dog to be free to learn with an open mind without any of that debilitating shutdown?
Yeah, absolutely. So I consider myself to be a rewards-based balanced trainer. So for me, if we use punishment in any case, in my opinion, it's appropriate and more of a learning tool than it is an outright punishment. So the scientific term of punishment in regards to learning and behavior is anything that stops or prevents a behavior. And that can be like a clap, that can be a quick A and a stomp of your foot, and or even like spatial pressure. But it's important, and then I am really big on positive reinforcement and trying to help people understand that if you want to use a correction or a punishment, ask yourself if you are actively taking the time to acknowledge the behaviors that you like and that you want to see more of, so that you can clearly provide a path for your dog behaviorally and a path for them to think of that you want them to go to. So I'd rather you not bark. So if we recreate a scenario where the dog typically barks, let's say put the doorbell on a recording and start rewarding them for not barking, waiting for them to not bark, and then changing the criteria and go, okay, now if I ring the doorbell and you bark, you get nothing. If I ring the doorbell and you don't bark, I'll reward you. And, there's a training plan behind that, like then turning it into a random event rather than a controlled training session, which the dog is clearly aware of. But I digress. The point here is that when we focus more on what our dogs want or what we want from our dogs, then we're able to provide a clear path for them. And then any discouragement for unwanted behaviors becomes a lot more clear to them and a part of the overall picture rather than just a focus on what they shouldn't be doing. So like I said earlier, we were coming from this very strict, I think, unbalanced view of our dogs. I certainly look at my dogs as children, and I encourage people in a healthy way to treat them as children. And what I mean by that is like having rules and boundaries, a learn to earn kind of relationship. For example, dogs can be very pushy. And if we teach them that in order to get, let's say, a petting, they need to come to us and sit rather than come to us and jump, it's equivalent to having a child that comes to you and pokes you and says, give me that, versus a child that comes and says, can I please have that? Both want something, but they've asked for it in a completely different way. And so I love helping people understand how they can effectively provide consequences, but more importantly, focus on what they want from their dogs.
When you talk about rewards, what could that look like? So in your scenario of the doorbell, is it always food-based rewards? And is there a downside to using food-based rewards?
I'll start with those two.
Okay.
So
yeah.
it doesn't always have to be food. It can certainly be toys, and that really depends on the dog, right? So the dog is the one that tells us what is more valuable. And so it could totally be toys. It could be throwing the ball. Doorbell rings, you throw the ball. Doorbell rings, dog doesn't bark, you play ball. And now we're just creating a different association, a different behavioral pattern. What happens when the doorbell rings, right? You can definitely be food. I like to use food more often just because dogs are animals that eat. So why not use their food as a part of the training process? If we have a hungry dog, we have a motivated dog. I would say the benefit to using food in some cases is that we can keep the momentum going and get in a lot more repetition. With toys, we have to take a break to allow the dog to enjoy the toy. So in this scenario with the doorbell rings, we give the dog a tug toy or a ball, we're going to have to let them engage with that for 10 15 seconds. Then we have to get the toy back and then repeat that process. With food, we can ring the doorbell, reward, ring the bell, reward, ring the bell, reward, and just keep that going. So it depends on the dog too. You can also be petting and praise and excitement. Maybe the dog doesn't care about a toy, but if you start jumping up and down and clapping and going, that's a good boy, his tail's going to be going and he's going to be super focused on you. And so these are things when I work with my clients, I observe and ask them, like, what makes your dog go? What do they want? Are they really motivated by affection? Are they really motivated by food? Knowing what motivates them will help you, in any case, communicate better with them as to what it is that you like that they're doing.
That's really interesting to think about the different scenarios that those different rewards might be useful in. And it made me think, if the dog is reacting to something, so again, I'm gonna use a real life scenario here. If this is just for everyone listening, it's not for me, of course. So
asking for a friend, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say someone has, I don't know, a 15-month-old puppy, maybe.
Okay.
And she's a hunting dog. We've never taken her hunting, but she's a hound. And so she loves to chase and sniff things out. I mean, her tracking abilities are just outrageous. But we also have a cat, and she loves to play with the cat. When we adopted her, they were the same size. So that was cute then, but now she's 65 pounds. The cat's 9 pounds. So, it's not ideal. Yeah. But I was thinking, sometimes when the cat runs by, she wants to chase and play. And when she gets her, her tail's wagging and the cat's like, leave me alone, whatever. Okay. Doesn't hurt her, but it's a problem because, right, cat doesn't want to be chased. But sure. I'm thinking, okay, so if her response is what she's wanting to do is physical, in that scenario, would it be maybe more beneficial to look at what she's wanting to do, and then instead of giving a treat, maybe using her body with the toy? Like, does that have any merit to it in terms of what they're trying to do with their body and redirect that?
It could, but here's where I would, like with this topic, I would have some questions. Like, one, is it practical to expect the cat to come by at a certain time? Because, for example, if you want to teach the puppy what to do in that situation, then we want to have better physical control. So we can't get caught off guard with the cat running away and then the dog going after them, and we just look like we're responding out of chaos. There's no control. Like, we got taken off, we're trying to send an email and all of a sudden a dog's running and we're just like, hey, no, don't do that. So being able to predict that scenario and then work your dog through it. On the other end of that, there's the preventative perspective. So knowing that she's a puppy, she, right?
She. I mean,
knowing that
it's a
she's a
friend's
puppy.
dog, so I don't know.
That's right. Okay. So knowing that she's a
Okay.
puppy and she has, the desire to chase and sniff, giving her the outlet to do those things in a controlled way that you set up, whatever that might look like. Maybe you do barn hunt classes. Maybe you do scent detection. Maybe you lay out some areas in the house where you put treats and then you tell her to go find them. And so she can, make her way through the house and using her nose and things like that. So you're fulfilling that on one end. And on the other end, you have, let's say you have her on a leash. And when she goes after the cat, she's restricted. And when she gives up, when she's pulling to try and go and she gives up on that pressure and comes back to you, you can praise and reward her for that.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, if I was giving you some advice and if we were doing a Zoom call, this is exactly what I would say. Give her the outlet, give her that mental stimulation that she needs on the front end. And then when she's around the cat, you can hold her to a higher standard and go, that's not allowed. And you tell her that by properly handling her with the leash and preventing her. And when she sees the cat, if there's any way that you could make the cat run back and forth a couple of times so that you can hold the dog and give her feedback for her ability to finally like relax and allow that to happen without the constant desire to go for it, then we're communicating with her. But in situations like that, I always say we want, and I know it's hard when we do it with other animals, but we want to try to recreate it so that way we can take the time to walk the dog through it, and give them feedback. And in this case, it would just be restriction, right? Holding the leash, making sure she doesn't get to her, and then providing positive reinforcement, petting, praise, potentially food, potentially a toy, when she finally gives up on the idea of going for the cat. And we show her that it's just relax. You can do all that stuff later. Here's not the time.
A few things you said there are really interesting. One is like in the scenario itself, but the other one is completely, I mean, what would seem to many people is completely unrelated, right? Giving her an outlet to thinking about why is this behavior happening, right? This is something very innate to her, and giving her a chance to use that ability and explore that and have fun with that, and almost have like a purpose with that. I think about what it would be like to be a dog. For a lot of people, their dogs are home alone all day when they're at work, and like there's that drive that they need, right, to express who they are. So I love that idea of thinking about it instead of saying, oh, this is a bad behavior, like, well, why is she doing that, or why are they doing that? And can we do that in a more productive setting? And then the flip side is having some kind of a plan and setting aside the training time, which it's hard. It is, right? Like it is very reactive. Like you said, you're writing emails, you're doing work, and then it's like, oh, hey, stop that, right? And then versus putting the scenario, setting it up. And I think from the human standpoint, that seems less stressful because you're going into it, you know what you're working on, it's right, versus just being reactive, and then you feel like you get worked up about it, and then that's not good for them, and it's that vicious cycle that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it can cause a lot of stress. Just using the example that you gave though, and I've had clients do this with more aggressive reactive dogs, but you can create a tether and then have the dog on the bed. So when you have your dog with you and you're unable to completely dedicate mindfulness to that scenario, if she's on a tether that's secured, then if she does go for the cat, she'll be stopped. You would be able to, then she's right here and your tether is like attached to the wall, for example. And then when she finally settles back down, you can praise her. And then anytime the cat runs by, her being restricted, however many repetitions it takes for her to learn that it's not even worth it anymore. Then when you start to see the cat running by and she's no longer doing that, then you can release that tether and go, okay, she's self-managing now. She's understanding that it's pointless. She's never going to get the cat. You know what I mean? And that would be a way to do it from a more hands-free place where you could focus on what you need to do. The dog is tethered. She can get up, she can try, but she'll never succeed at getting the cat. The other thing to keep in mind from a behavior perspective is this is an issue that I see a lot where, and in your case, right? So puppy goes after the cat, you get up, you're yelling no, there's not a lot of control on your end. And what the dog learns as an example is that no means you chase after the dog. And how does that relate in other scenarios when you're saying no and you're trying to get your dog to stop doing something and they hear that word and they look at you and they're like, and then they run away, right? Because they know that no is a predictor of you chasing them.
Chasing game.
And so it's like
Interesting.
there's so many things that could potentially arise just from that one issue where your dog sees that when you shout these words, you have no control. And so they start to, they're like kids, they're so much like kids where they just kind of like, they're like, I want to play this game with you. I know you can't beat me. I know you can't win. And, for them, they're having fun. And then for us, we get frustrated. And then the dog is like having fun and then they get stressed because now they're in trouble. So it's just, like I said, it can be this vicious circle. So
that really illustrates the point of how important clear communication is between you and the pet, and not just a constant stream of communication, but having set some boundaries and some etiquettes or some guidelines of what does it mean to live in a human home as a dog?
Yeah.
What are the basic skills that they need to know to do human, you know what I mean? Do life in a human setting. Because we do have different expectations. Well, you can't just pee wherever you want. Like peeing is for outside and inside is for family time, So
in most people's houses.
Oh, I hope everyone's house. But yeah, okay.
I've been in a couple of houses that I would question that, but I would.
Okay, well, we'll leave that there. But the question I wanted to kind of direct to is what would you consider to be the most important skill set? Like we're talking maybe a handful of behaviors that when you've set your dog up with that early on, they can live without that constant, is this all right to do? Like, I don't know if am I going to get yelled at? Like just to set their etiquette of how to live in a human home.
What would be like the top thing to do?
So what, because we just thinking of the example that Katie said, like, so she's going to see a situation happen and the first reaction is going to be no, don't do that, right? And then the chase after, and we've just explained how that's really counterproductive, right? But if the dog has a preconceived set of skills to know that chasing the cat or chasing per se or chasing in the house, whatever the family's rule is for their household, then they're equipped for life, not just in that one-off situation when it comes up, but for every time that there's a chasing opportunity or every time there's a barking opportunity. It's not just don't bark at the postman, but don't bark when the doorbell goes, or don't bark when people arrive, or bark once and let us know, and then your job is done, and then we praise you for that bark. And so each family is going to probably have a slightly different set of etiquettes, whether they like the dog at the table or whether they want the dog in the basket during meal times and so forth. But what would be some of the basic things that would really help a dog in its entire life to know the right behaviors at the right time?
Gotcha. Well, I would say a couple of things. One, I'm especially with you. There's a lot of, let's say, unruliness, right, or rambunctiousness with dogs. The first thing I'd recommend is having the dog on a leash so that you can be there to literally walk them through how to handle certain situations. So having physical control over the dog so that you can guide them to a location if you want to put them on their bed, or if you're hanging out with them and you don't want them to roam around the house and potentially pee on something, or get into the trash, or whatever the case is. So I would say having good management skills and the know-how to implement them. So I think that one thing that I feel is a very it's just not mentioned in dog training is the need and the importance of management and good management and supervision in and around the house, especially with young puppies. There is a bit of micromanaging, in my opinion, that needs to take place when we're raising puppies or even have a new dog in the house. And the way that I like to equate this is to having a young child. I'm not saying that you need to be a micromanager for the rest of their life. That's not okay. And I don't agree with that. However, in the beginning, like with a child, when we're teaching them to have good manners, every time they meet someone when they're young, we say, what do you say? Right? Say hi, shake their hand, say please, say thank you, wash your hands after you go out, after you come inside from play, wash your hands after you use the bathroom. We have to make sure as parents that we're watching the children and we're making sure that they're doing those things. Hey, did you wash your hands? Hey, did you take off your shoes? Whatever the case, right? With a dog, we do the same thing. We guide them through these situations. We make sure that if we don't want the dog on the couch, that we don't just go into the other room and leave the dog in the living room. while we're going to spend 30 minutes checking our emails. We either take the dog with us, or we put the dog in a location where they're not going to be able to jump on the furniture and exercise that unwanted behavior. The more that you see that your dog is sort of self-sufficient in certain areas, the more that you can loosen the reins, if you will, and be more relaxed, and then in general, I would say take the time to pay attention to the things that your dog is doing that you like. So teaching a dog to live with us in our world, everyone is different, like you said. So in some cases, people want their dogs on the couch. In other cases, people don't. In some cases, dogs shouldn't be on the couch. And if you need to make those changes, what does that look like? And so a big part of that, in my opinion, is like exercising or practicing. So if I have a client that doesn't want their dog on the furniture, this is how I teach them to teach their dog. I say, okay, let's put a leash on your dog. Now let's go into the kitchen and then walk into the living room and sit down on the couch like you normally would. Because what's your dog probably going to do? They're going to jump up on the couch with you, right? Okay, we know that's going to happen, so we're going to be prepared for it. So we have a leash on the dog. They walk around. They sit down on the couch. Boom. The dog jumps up on the couch. I say, grab the leash, tell the dog off, and guide them off the couch. The dog might resist. We're not trying to be angry. It's non-emotional. We're just guiding them off the couch. As soon as they get off the couch, we go, good boy, good girl. We give them a little pet. We get up, we go to the kitchen, we come back, we sit back down on the couch. Dog jumps up on the couch again. No problem. They're learning. Off. We get them off the couch. On the third repetition, we come back. We sit on the couch. The dog doesn't jump on the couch. That's a good boy. Come here, bud. We give them love and affection. We get up. We do it again. We sit back down on the couch. The dog doesn't jump on the couch. We give them praise and affection. So we teach them that there's another way that you can be close to me without having to get on the couch, because I don't want you up there anymore. Because we got a brand new couch. I just spent $3,000 and I'm not about to have you put paw prints on it like you did the last one, right? Whatever the reason is. But this is how we do it. We have to teach them. We can't expect a child to know basic math if we've never sat down with them and repeated and said to them, okay, what's 2 + 2? Okay, what's 3 + 2? Okay, now what's 2 + 2? And then kind of catching them and asking them the same questions over and over and over to make sure that they understand it. It's just like when we were kids learning. We needed that repetition. We all know our ABCs because we sang the song so many times. And just like we want our dogs to know things, we can't just assume because they've done it once that they know it. That's not fair to them, because it's not fair to us if we take that same assumption. If I teach you something one time, all of a sudden you're an expert at it? Absolutely not. So, and I think people tend to do that with their dogs. They're like, oh, he sat once when I told him to sit after I said it 5 times, so he knows what it means. It's like, no, he doesn't know what it means.
And to your point, we're giving them other messages of what things mean when we're not actively training, right? So if we're not actively training, we flop down on the couch after a long day and we let the dog come up and we're not doing it, then they're being taught something else at that moment,
Exactly.
right? So it's like being mindful, not just during the training periods, but also outside of the training periods. And I think for me, that's what's so exhausting, because it's like, okay, all the time.
Yeah, no,
when
I
we
know.
have focused time, great, I'm on it. But I also know that during the day, I'm not always on it.
100%. And I can't tell you how many times, one example comes to mind not that long ago. I had a client that was really adamant about it. She didn't want her dog jumping on her anymore. And we just talked about, I just gave an example of how to manage that and handle the dog. And 2 minutes go by and the dog jumps up on her. And as she's talking to me, she's just like, and I looked at her and I said, I thought she didn't want the dog jumping on you. She's like, oh my gosh, oh my God. And I said, okay, so, and here's the thing. I don't judge people. I get it. I mean, I've literally looked for my phone and it's in my hand, right? So who am I to judge you because you're trying to make changes and you have this habitual behavioral pattern that you're trying to check. So there's no judgment, right? But that's just you have to understand that it takes a mindful effort. It takes a mindful effort. You have to be conscious of it. And so, that's just important to know. And there's nothing that I can do to help you or anyone become more mindful. That's just something that comes with the territory of the strong desire to make those changes.
So we've been referring to you as a dog trainer, but you're really a human trainer, because you're training us how to work with
the dog training part is easy.
Yeah,
it's always the clients, not to say that it's difficult, but it's just the more intricate aspect of what I do. And there is some some difficulties with dogs, because a lot of times we want to know why the dog is doing something, and it's not always that easy because there's a lot of factors involved. But it's definitely, for me, working with people, that is the bulk of what I do, because there has to be an understanding. And a lot of times too, if you don't know why I'm asking you to do something, then you're less likely to do it. So I make sure that I include the why almost every time when it's needed, and sometimes when it's not, just because I think it's important to understand that.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying not to go down the rabbit hole of asking you all of the things all of the time. So I'm going to let you chime in.
So, yeah, let me gather my thoughts as well, because I'm just thinking of so many scenarios and examples. I mean, even back to what you were saying earlier, like working out, is it a toy? Is it a treat? Is it your presence? Is it their best friend? In the zoo environment, we do preference testing with our animals to find that out at the start of a training program. A training plan is being designed. Like, we have a means and an end and we'll say, okay, so does this raccoon or snow leopard or chimpanzee, what's their favorite thing? And we'll run some tests to find that out. Is that something that you bring into your dog client world?
Absolutely.
As well?
Yeah,
So
establishing operations. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're familiar with the term, but basically, and it's important to know too that with dogs, those things that are valuable to them can change in the environment.
Yes.
If the environment changes, so do those motivators. And so this is something that's important to understand. And I ask people, when we have a dog that's reactive outside, I say, does your dog do they like to play tug, like to play fetch? Like, oh my gosh, yeah, they love to play fetch. And I say, okay, well, where do they play fetch? Well, usually in the hallway here or in the yard. And I say, okay, have you never played fetch with your dog, like out at a park? And they say no. And I go, okay, that's important to know, because we can't just assume that your dog is going to be super ball motivated at the park when there's other dogs around, when you've never played with them at the park. And the way that I like to help my clients explain it, and the reasons why, is because if for example, you're used to going to the gym to get in your workout, and I say to you, okay, now I need you to do your same workout at home, that motivation is not going to be there, because the gym is an environment that you feel motivated to work out for whatever reasons, maybe because it's just what you've always known. And so now I tell you to work out at home with the same intensity, and it just feels weird. You're at home and you're sweaty and it's hot and you're like doing things, and it just doesn't feel right because you're not in the same location that you normally do it. And this is exactly how dogs think and operate. So we can try and make the dog a little bit more interested in that toy, in that environment. But yeah, so to answer your question, absolutely, we go through that to help the dog, or excuse me, to see what it is that the dog is motivated by. But it's also important to understand that that motivation can absolutely change when the environment changes and things in the environment change.
And consistency as well. Again, I'm drawing back from zoo examples, but we would have training stations. And so this individual has this training station. A station just means, for people who may not have heard that before, just their special mat, their special perch, their special zone, and it's their zone. And then the next animal has their zone. And so you've got your station. So this is where you as an individual do your learning. Whether I'm training 3 of you at the same time or just one, that's always your station. And so it creates a consistency. They know what's expected when we're starting a session on their station. They're like, okay, I've come to school. Now, we always gave them the choice of whether they came to school for the day. And if they were having an off day, then we would let them have an off day and be by themselves. But those who wanted to come to school would come to school. And the consistency of, okay, well, I've got the same equipment. I've got my whistle. I've got my bag of treats ready to reward you for those things. Do you find the same thing? Having the consistency as well as the context that you're just talking about there is a key part.
Absolutely. I mean, consistency is a universal principle for me that is applied when training. That it's not just consistency with, maybe a particular way of training, but also the consistency in doing it every day. The overall message to the dog, because inconsistency can create a lot of frustration in animals. And again, I love to break it down like this. If you go into work, if you're a coffee person, which most people are, they drink their coffee in the morning, you go into work and they have coffee there, and that's what you expect. And then you notice that now you go to work and there's not coffee every day. So you're missing out on the opportunity to go get coffee because there isn't any there. So you start to become frustrated in the inconsistency that there isn't something there that you expect. And that can, the same thing can happen in dog training and working with animals. But so I'm kind of getting off a little bit, but in some cases we can use frustration to actually create a behavior change, right? So let's just say, as an example, I have a dog that is jumping and they get frustrated. So they start barking at me, but finally they sit down and then I pet them. So the dog got frustrated and went through a couple of different behaviors to see which one would provoke me to give them what they want. So we can use that. So, but yes, consistency is so incredibly important when it comes to training and learning. And that the thing is, it's across the board. It's not just animals, it's with us too.
Okay, so here's my question. So that makes sense in theory, right? Consistency, yes. But the reality is that we need them to listen in scenarios where it's inconsistent, right? In different environments. So how do we then translate that to another scenario? Does that make sense? Like, do you want me to give a specific example?
You can, if you want to. I can try and answer it. And if it doesn't align with your question
Go ahead.
completely.
Go ahead.
So I would say number one, repetition. So with consistency, we also need frequency and repetition. Those, they kind of go hand in hand, right? Because that is consistency. So the more often that I can practice something with the dog, the more likely I can hold them accountable to that expectation. So while, let's say, for example, I'm doing obedience training, while the environment may change, right? That's inconsistent. What I'm asking from them is consistent. And the way that I guide them and communicate with them is consistent. So we are consistent. The environment is not, and so things may change in the environment, but and I like to use obedience as an example, but I've taught my dogs that regardless of what's going on, a down means you lay down until I release you. And I don't say that from like a, or else. It's more so that I've rewarded them. I've worked them through scenarios. I've put them in situations where when they make the right choice and I help them to be successful, I reward them for that. And of course, if they got up, I make sure that they lay back down. So that's a part of it. But again, it's working them through it and being consistent with my communication and my expectations with them everywhere we go. And in training, that's referred to as generalization.
And sometimes those really strong limitations on asking for a behavior and holding them in that behavior is for their safety. It's for a very good reason, because you may be giving the down command. I've seen this happen a lot with the sheepdog. People are walking their dogs in the fields or whatever, but you'll ask for a down and their sheepdogs will just drop like that and go, and they'll hold in that position while the car whizzes past. And that way, that when they're in the hold position, when they're down, they're not going to dart out in front of the car. So it's a safety thing. And it's equally with emergency recall. If you want a spontaneous reaction when you give that emergency recall, so whatever they're doing, regardless of how exciting that thing might be, they're going to listen to you and come back to safety. And now you've just saved their life.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's tons of practical applications for obedience. And I think, honestly, the term is kind of like, militant, but the reality is that we need our dogs to listen to us if we want to give them some of the things we want. And in my case, it's like off-leash life, freedom to run around and be a dog. My dog Logan loves to run around and sniff things and pee on things. And he can do that all day because I know that when I call him, he's going to come back to me.
And I think that's the real goal there. From a longevity perspective, is to have that trust to know they can go off and be a dog, dig a hole, get muddy, get in the stream, go play with other dogs, meet other dogs nicely, meet other people, do all of the exploration, engagement with the natural world, get all of that energy being satisfied, investigation, mental stimulation, everything else. But that they're safe because that they know what the boundaries are. And when you say stop, because it's for a really good reason, that they will. And they, so the enrichment and the safety at the same time, plus I guess your relationship bond too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was one thing that I really noticed. So obviously I live here in the States, but I was in the UK a couple months ago, and everyone at the parks, everyone's dogs are off leash. And I was so jealous, first of all, but then it also made me thinking, like, because it really stood out to me. And then it was like, well, why doesn't that happen more in the States? Is it like the environment? Is it because we're not working with the dogs as much? It's just, it was such a stark contrast.
I have my own, I guess, opinions and thoughts on that. So when my wife and I went to Spain a couple years ago, one of the things that she noticed was that we were in Valencia and people were walking their dogs off leash. And recently on our trip to Barcelona, we noticed that people were walking in coffee shops with their dogs off leash. And we're talking about in the city of Barcelona. So we're not like out in the country anywhere. They're off leash, walking in the coffee shop on busy street corners. And then it was great. And then another thing we noticed is that a lot of the dogs aren't neutered. So I would assume the females aren't spayed. So that was very interesting as well. And she asked me about that. She says, why is that? I also noticed that there's a lot more dogs out in the streets and they're with people. So they're not like street dogs, but they're also not reactive. Why is that? And I said, the obvious answer for me is because they've been doing this ever since they were puppies. People have been bringing their dogs everywhere. Here in the States, I don't know what the veterinarians teach in other countries, but I can tell you that here people are told to not take their puppies out until they're 4 months old and their vaccine schedules have been completed. And I completely disagree with that. The thing is we have to take the dog's safety into consideration, and I do. However, there are certain places that we don't want to bring young puppies, like dog parks, especially when they're younger. We don't want to expose them to potentially sick dogs. But that doesn't mean that we can't be walking them around our neighborhood and bringing them out to a park and getting them exposure. Part of socialization is normalization. So it's not necessarily the dog meeting everyone as much as it's the dog being around certain situations, but also having something to focus on. And that something to focus on is you, the owner, where you're engaging with the dog, playing with them, training them, having a good time while there are other things going on in the environment. And so I think in the UK and in Europe in general versus the United States, there's just more emphasis on having dogs outside. And some cities here in the States are more dog friendly, and it shows because people are out with their dogs more and the dogs are well behaved, or at least not crazy reactive. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't have the best recall, or maybe their dog doesn't sit when they say it one time, but their dog isn't freaking out every time they see another dog or whatever the case is. And here in the States, I think that at least in Vegas, I know that was starting to be a big problem, especially after COVID. But that would be my take on it. And dog parks in Europe are very different. They're usually open spaces and they're not like fenced in. And the other thing too is that people pay more attention to their dogs. People are involved with their dogs. And here in the States, you go to a dog park and people are on their phone and their dogs are running around being jerks, or they have the dog that's running around afraid of all the jerks. And so now they're having really bad interactions and people are like, oh, their dog's just playing. It's like, no, okay, that dog might be playing, but he's playing way too rough for that other dog who is super defensive and is about to snap, And so it's a very complex situation we have here that I could talk about forever, but there's so many aspects to dogs.
Yeah, that's been an issue that I've run into, which is that people don't look. I'm no dog training expert, but like people don't even. Not only are they not paying attention, but often people who are paying attention, they're completely misreading the situation, and it's shocking because it's so easy to see, like you said, the fear or the anger or the aggression, and it's like makes me nervous because okay, well now my dog's interacting with that dog, and this person is just like. Meanwhile, their dog's like borderline attacking mine. And it's just, it's this like disconnect. And part of me thinks that, a lot of it has to do with, again, working from home is more prevalent now, but probably spend so much time alone. And then, then they get to the dog park and they're like, go nuts too. And that's like the only socialization. It's the only time they get out and run around and play versus if there's a way to integrate it more into their life. I don't know if that's even something you can, if you want to speak to that, like what about someone who doesn't work from home and their dog is home alone all day? And this might be something that they're running into where it's hard to train, it's harder to train in that scenario, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I definitely have clients with those lives that make it more difficult for them to engage more with their dogs. But this is where I think we have to learn to call in the support of the, I would say, I like to call it extracurricular activities. So the dog walker, the potentially having a doggy daycare. And just to be clear, like, I'm not a huge fan of doggy daycares, but if your dog is going to be home all alone, I think that that's a better choice personally. um, Having a dog runner, there are companies now that come over and will take your dog on a hike, a bike ride, or something like that, and get them out and get them exposed to other dogs and living a good life. So I think that's always a great option. And I always tell my clients who like to go to dog parks, who, here in the States, I'm not a big fan of dog parks. I get why, when done correctly, they can be super beneficial for dogs. But it's important to know that not every dog wants to be in a dog park. Not every dog is social. Dogs have personalities a lot like we do. We have people that they just like their close group of friends, that no new friends, you know what I mean? No new friends. And that's how I met a lot of dogs like that. They don't want new friends. They just want to hang out with their family. Maybe that's a couple dogs and a couple people. But knowing that is important too. So we have to learn to know our dogs. But for those people who have social dogs, or at least playful dogs, I would say get the right training tool, like a long line or a long lead. And it's like a 30 to 50 or even 100-foot leash, not a retractable. But if your dog likes to play, get outside with them, have them on a long line so you have good physical control if needed, and play with them, run around with them, engage with them. And I think that this will also get you moving, running around, playing with your dog. So what does that look like for you and your dog? Maybe your dog just wants to roam around the park and sniff. Let them do it if that's what's going to give them fulfillment. But at least you have a long line on them. They're not completely off leash, and now you have control. And I have a lot of clients that when we do this, they see really remarkable changes with their dog and in their relationship, because they've only ever had their dog like on a 6-foot leash or completely off leash. So on a 6-foot leash, the dog doesn't really have any freedom. They can't do anything. And the owner just feels like they're constantly pulling them everywhere. We put them on a long line, a 30 or 50-foot leash. Now the dog is able to go, get a little bit more freedom, sniff around, be a dog, and the owner still has physical control. So in the event that somebody comes too close, or another dog, and their dog doesn't respond to the recall, they can literally reel their dog back in nice and easy. And something as simple as that, I think, can really help people live better lives with their dogs and help dogs have a little bit more fun when they're outside.
Mm. I love that you highlight the different personalities, because that's really important. And even at different times of day, dogs will prefer to have a lesson, like a training session with you. They'll prefer to have a sniff session. They'll prefer to have a wild exercise and romp around. So being able to train your dog well is a communication tool that you can use with each other to build the relationship, but also being understand their body language and their personality, and communicating on that level involves, results in a richer relationship for all of you, because you can set about to make their lives fulfilled as opposed to frustrated. And so often the frustration is the thing that comes from those short leads, because there's a sniff over there that they desperately want to have, right? And they're pulling, and you're just sick of the pulling, so you pull them back and don't let them, and now they're deprived, they're frustrated, and they're like, why is my mum or my dad, who I think loves me because they do all these nice things for me and they give me this praise, but now they're hampering, they're frustrating me, they're thwarting my intentions, I don't feel rich and fulfilled. So I just the importance of good communication and good training with your pets is just so paramount for so many reasons.
It really is. Yeah. And even in a situation, like you described, sometimes I work with some clients and getting more information about what walks look like for them and for their dogs. I'm like, so walks suck for you, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, what do you think your dog feels, right? Because all you've been doing this whole time is pulling on them, every 3 feet. So again, that stress factor, I think, applies in both scenarios, or excuse me, for both parties, the dogs and people.
But then when it gets right, it's right for everybody. And so those stress hormones go down, the joy of the experience goes up, the positive emotions skyrocket, and then it's a longevity boost for both of you.
That, and also I think it's important to understand the goal of people. So for example, in the situation that I just described, like putting your dog on a long line, letting them sniff around, that right there can make a world of difference for people. And then when I have clients that are looking for a more structured walk, right? Because their dog is just completely out of control. We do need to implement some rules and boundaries and have good structure. The advice would be a little different. I would say, don't allow your dog to just pull off to the side constantly and sniff. Let's encourage them to walk with you, reward them for walking with you, teach them what it means to walk with you, and develop or create a learn to earn or a work hard, play hard kind of walking style, where you teach your dog that, hey, let's walk around the park 1 or 2 laps, and then you can go around and sniff, and you can have that. So there's a little bit more structure there versus, what I just previously mentioned, which is, just, kind of let the dog off and sniff. And depending on your goals and your relationship with your client, one might benefit you more than the other, depending on what is going on with you and your dog. And this is the beauty of like working with people and dogs, that there's a lot of factors to take into consideration, a lot of variables that need to be strongly considered as we continue to mold an appropriate training plan for people.
Definitely. I'm just going to add one thing, but I know Katie wants to ask a question. But just what you were saying about having the discipline or the structure of going around the park a couple of times first to reinforce the bond or the etiquette and just the way we're doing the walk, or just to get diversity even into that outdoor experience, is also really good for a warm-up. Because if we have a dog who's been pent up inside all day, desperate to go outside, what's the first thing they're going to do when they're free? They're going to pelt off and just go crazy. And so without having your muscles warmed up from a little bit of a trot around for a couple of minutes first, the risk of injury is just so much higher. So that structured walk for 10 minutes to get to the park, or to go around the outside once or twice on a just a gentle pace, conditions the body to then be ready to go for that. Okay, now we can really get to play.
Absolutely. You got to warm them up first.
So it's pretty clear at this point that training is beneficial for pretty much all dogs, right? It's not just a matter of, oh, you have a bad dog, or you're a bad dog owner and you haven't done what should be done, or you have an aggressive dog or reactive dog. Like, truly, if you come at it from the standpoint, Penny, I know you're always coming at it from the standpoint of enriching their lives. If you have that relationship where it's not just obedience, but it's also etiquette, and it's just kind of this blend of everything, it can strengthen the bond, which who doesn't want that? And it enriches their lives. Again, who doesn't want that? But my question is, when is the right time to start training? And
Yesterday.
Well, okay, so here's why I ask, right? Adopting a puppy, we're like, great, we're gonna start leash training. And I mean, we rescued her. She was probably 7 weeks old, maybe 8 weeks old. We're like, oh, we'll leash train. And then we read stuff online. It was like, don't leash train until they're 6 months. And we were like, okay.
See, I don't agree with that at all.
Interesting.
And I'll explain myself, but I want to first answer your question more completely. By asking a question. So everyone watching too, you can participate if you'd like to, but do you have a dog? If the answer is yes, raise your hand. Okay. All right. Are you a dog trainer? If the answer is yes, raise your hand.
I mean,
everybody,
I try to train my dog. Does that count?
Everybody should raise their hand, because if you have a dog, you are a dog trainer. The reason why is because who is training your dog? Who is your dog looking to and learning from constantly and figuring out, what to do in order to get this or what not to do in order to avoid that. So we are dog trainers as soon as we bring a dog into our home. That's number one. You have to realize that. Number two, now you may not be a professional dog trainer, but you are a dog trainer and you are teaching your dog every single day. Now, the answer to your question more specifically is dog training starts as soon as you bring your dog home. And I would even argue that prior to bringing that dog home, puppy or rescue, older dog, because you have to prepare the home for the dog. Where are they going to sleep? You have to know these things and plan for them. What kind of food is the dog going to eat? Are we going to train the dog, right? Are we going to take the time to teach them specific behaviors and tasks and things like that? So that all comes prior to even getting the puppy or the dog. And then once they're in the home, absolutely. We can start teaching a puppy at 7 weeks old what come means, that just coming to me is a rewarding behavior. And I would certainly put a leash on a dog and start training them early on, but I would let that leash drag on the puppy, and I would teach them while wearing the leash to follow me along. A lot of times when I'm working with my clients, they try to walk their puppy, and again, they're walking them on a 6-foot leash, and it's a disaster because the puppy's a puppy and the puppy wants to see that. They want to chase the blowing leaf in the wind. They want to chase the bird and the squirrel. And so what I say is put the dog on a longer leash, give them more freedom, but make a better attempt to encourage them to follow you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? Move away from them. Puppies want to chase things. Why are you standing still telling your puppy to get back over to you when they're chasing the bird that's trotting along the ground? Why don't you become that bird? Why don't you run away from them and make some noise and get excited? And then when they come to you, give them some of their food that you're going to feed them anyway. You're going to give it to them in the bowl anyway. You might as well carry it in a bag on you. When they come to you, you feed them, you praise them, you reward them, you get excited with them. And another thing I like to mention when you're rewarding your dog with food, it's not just about food. It's not just about the toy, right? We don't just hand the dog food like, yeah, here you go, eat it, right? It's an experience, it's an event. So it's food and praise and petting and, excitement and movement. It's their ball and more excitement and more engagement. So it's a whole event that surrounds, what's going on and really helps to emphasize to the dog the things that we want them to feel awesome about. So leash training for me would start early on. We can teach a puppy sit. We can teach them down. We can teach them come when called, recall. We can teach them how to walk next to us on a leash. We can crate train them. We can teach them to go to their bed. We can do all these things at 7 or 8 weeks old. Now, the trick is the thing that's really, I think people miss is that we can't have strong or high expectations. Okay. I can't expect the puppy to sit in a sit for a minute. Maybe they can, but if they don't do it, I'm not going to get stern with them. I'm not going to be like, hey, you need to do this. Or if they're going for that blowing leaf in the wind, I'm not going to tell them no and be popping on their leash. If I have a 90-pound, dog that I've already worked with that is doing that, I might be a little bit more stern with telling them not to do that. But with a puppy, I'm not. I'm just going to allow them to try to go for it. I'm going to restrict them with the leash. I'm going to step on that leash. And when they give up on it, I'm going to be right there behind them like, hey, buddy, that's a good boy. Come on, let's go. And then he's going to go, oh, my God, forget about that leaf. This guy is awesome. And he has my favorite treat. And he has my favorite toy. So there's a whole, it's like, it's not that hard. It's just that people don't understand to like what degree they have to be involved. It's like they just think like, oh yeah, let the puppy explore, and I'm not opposed to that, but too much exploration and fulfillment and excitement surrounding exploration leaves you in the dark over here where you're not that fun. So try to reverse that. Like, yes, exploring happens sometimes, but most of the time we have a lot of fun together, and I'm also important. Logan, he's a dingo. He loves to explore. He loves when we go on hikes to go out and sniff, but I've made myself valuable to him. So when I call him back to me, he knows that there is a high probability that he'll be rewarded for that. Or I'll call him back just to come back to me and touch, and then he can go back off and do his thing. But we have this little game that you have to come back to me. Okay, now you're free. Go ahead. Go keep playing. And it's like a check-in with a kid, right? You just do a quick check-in. I had a check-in when I was a kid. Go home. All right, mom, here, I'm alive. All right, son, I'll see you later. Go back. See you in another 2 hours. That's it. As long as I checked in, I was good. I had my freedom.
As you were talking about just like having realistic expectations and setting the bar of achievement to what is achievable, it brings it back to kids, right? You wouldn't expect a small child to, I don't know why there's so many analogies. I can't even pick one. Like it has to be a real.
To tie their shoes.
Yeah. You're like, shoes, you make a right. That's such a good example.
Yeah.
You remember when you're trying to tie your shoes and like you make a loop and then you like just pick up the strings like, all right, your little shoes.
Exactly.
It's not that you can't teach a child how to tie their shoes, but how much are they tying it? It doesn't matter. It's the effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like you're teaching a kid to clean their room. What does that look like? It's a matter of picking up a toy and putting it in a basket. And we're like, oh my gosh, good job. We're not going to expect them to grab the vacuum cleaner. They're 3. You know what I mean? So there's levels to that. When they're a little bit older, we can tell them to go get the vacuum cleaner. And it's the same thing with a puppy. We can certainly teach them to come when called. We can certainly teach them to sit when we say the word. Now, are we going to expect the puppy to sit still when somebody comes over and they're looking at the puppy and they're getting all excited? No. And that's also not appropriate to ask the puppy to do and then hold them
Mm.
accountable to that, because we're going to have to use a lot of pressure on them, and that's not appropriate. So
I think that's what's hard, at least for me in the training, is knowing when they should know and what they should know, right?
yeah,
15 months, like, is it normal and healthy and okay that like when she sees other dogs on a walk, she still gets so excited, like it's the most amazing thing in the world? Or like at this age, should she be able to like chill a little more and like contain herself? And being that I don't have that background, it's just I don't know how to know.
yeah. So I'll answer it like this. I think number one is that it's a perspective thing, right? So I'm sure there are people that are watching this that go, yeah, I love that. I love how excited my dog gets, and I'm totally fine with that. And there are other people that would not agree with that. I think so. I understand that, but also I think it's important to understand from the dog's perspective, is that healthy for them? Because there is a level of frustration and stress that can arise from not getting what they want. And I think it's important to teach dogs, just like we have to learn and we have to teach kids, that you can't always get what you want. And we need to learn how to deal with the emotions that come with that, the frustration. So to answer the question, is it okay? I think it depends on the person, but if you're asking me for the dog, I would say no. It's not great that every time they see other dogs, they get so worked up that they can't control themselves. Because while it might be, you might look at that and go, oh, well, they're just excited. Yes, but they can't always have an interaction with the dog. So what happens when that happens? What happens internally for the dog? They're frustrated, they're stressed, and there's all this excitement that hasn't been released, and what do they do with that? And so I think it's healthier to have a dog that's more composed and understands that, just like a child, every time we pass a park or a game store, we don't get to go into the game store and play games. Every time we pass a candy shop, we don't get to go into the candy shop and eat candy. That's just life, And so to me, that's healthy. If every time you pass a candy store, you have to go get candy because that's what you did when you were a kid, I would say you probably don't live a healthy life. Making an assumption here, but I wouldn't be too far off. I'm pretty confident. So that's how I would look at that. It's deeper than just whether or not it's okay. Is it healthy mentally for the dog to always be in this state of excitement and craziness and have this expectation? I would argue, and I would say no.
That's a really interesting take on it, and definitely not an angle that I thought of. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
hope that that's helpful.
My pleasure. And I want to clarify and say that it's not bad either, right? So it's not bad or wrong, but I would say that, let me just give you an example. Let me give you a solution, right? Because I think, I certainly didn't do that when I was speaking. A solution will be this: teaching the puppy that calmness gets her what she wants. So if you can wait it out, wait for even a few seconds of calmness where she maybe looks at you or just stays in a sit just for a few seconds, and then giving the reward, and then repeating that process every time and expanding on the amount of time that she's calm, and then giving the reward, which is the interaction. So it's not to say that she shouldn't have interactions. It's just saying that let's try and create more calmness around that. An example with puppies would be too, when I help my clients raise their puppies, I say, when people come over, have your dog in a kennel or in an X pen or in an area that's confined. So number one, you don't have to worry about the puppy rushing the door and jumping all over people, and we don't create bad habits there. But also understand that when people come over, tell them not to focus on your puppy. I know that the puppy is the center of attention and they are the star of the show. And of course, people are now flocking to your home to meet the new puppy, but just give it a grace period. Give it a 15-minute window. When they come over, you ask them how their day was. You give them some coffee, you get them a glass of water, you have them sit down. The puppy is all excited at first, and finally they lay down and they're like, all right, I'm just going to hang out. And that's the moment where you calmly go over to the puppy and you go, come on, let's go meet these new friends that we have. And then they learn that calmness is what gets them what they want. There's not a lot of initial excitement, which later on in life becomes more and more and more difficult to come back from, because now we have this really anxious and worked up dog who's never learned how to deal with what that feels like and settle down. So the timing of it, having her sit and be a little bit calm, and however long that might take a few minutes for you, and going into it is really important. So whenever I have my clients and we work on things, I tell them, go into your sessions with the understanding that it's going to take you some time. Don't just go in there like, I need this to stop right now. Dedicate 20 minutes to it. And that'll give you some leeway, right? Just like for our call, we had a little bit of a buffer just in case we had a little technical difficulties and things like that. So this way we're not like, oh my God, we got to get started. There's a lot of stress. Oh my God, right? So imagine if we did it that way. We wouldn't have such a, organic, naturally flowing conversation. We'd be like pressed because we're short on time. So having the time and the dedicating that time to do that is really important.
I just want to pick up on a couple of things you said there as well. Something that we tend to overlook as humans is that doing what looks like nothing is actually one of the hardest behaviors for our animals to learn, because they're being stimulated by our presence. Our presence is usually, for animals that live in captivity, our presence is one of the most, if not the most exciting thing in their day, in their routine, in their life. We're the ones that bring the novelty, the diversity, the opportunities, the play, the food, like every good thing comes from our presence. And so asking an animal to just sit still over there, be quiet for a moment, not because you're cross with them, but just you're asking them to just tone it down. That's really hard for animals. And we need to heavily reward them for that nothing behavior, for that calmness. And the other thing as well is often we get so excited when they get it right that we go, yay, you were calm for like 3 seconds. And of course that just winds the dog back up to the levels of, in stratosphere. So when you're praising for nice, calm, simmer down behavior, go in with a, oh, well done, baby, you did so well. Would you like a little? And you just take the energy down, and that helps to reinforce. Because I like what you asked before is, are you a dog trainer? And what I would add to that is, yes, every single person with a dog is a dog trainer, but animals, whether they're a dog or a wild animal or in the zoo, every animal is learning all the time. It doesn't matter if we think we're in a training session with them or not. They are observing what we're doing and they're learning from that, and they will alter their behavior based on their observations. So again, that consistency is really important, but no matter what you're doing, they're learning.
Absolutely, they are.
What are your thoughts on training older dogs? We know that in humans, we used to think that our brains were really just static. What we knew after a certain age, and that's it. And now we know that our brains do have this plasticity. And yes, while it's easier to pick up learning a language when you're younger and et cetera, we can learn a lot, both in terms of like book learning, but also just, neuronal connections and, what we're getting from our environment and so forth. Is it the same with our pets?
100%. People ask me all the time if their dog is too old to learn anything. And sometimes if it's appropriate, I'll ask them, is it too old? Or is your grandmother too old to learn how to cook a new recipe? Is your mom too old to finally learn how to use a smartphone? No, of course not. So to add to that, I think it's important too to realize that dogs, when they have a bad behavior, or I should say a bad habit, or something that we would consider a bad behavior, and we want them to change that behavior, that they have no understanding that that behavior is unwanted. They don't know that. We are the ones that determine whether it's wanted or not. And when you think about that, and then you think about the fact that if you have a bad or unwanted behavior or habit in your own life that you want to change, how much of a conscious effort does it take for you to change your own behavior when you know it's a bad or unwanted behavior? Okay. And now we have your dog who does not know that we have to tell them that it is not good, or we would prefer this. So how much conscious effort and mindfulness has to go into that dog? I mean, really think about that. As somebody who has been a smoker, and quit smoking, and somebody who had really bad eating habits, and I lost 60 pounds. I used to be really overweight, and now I'm fit and all that fun stuff. Like, that's a conscious effort. But I had to recognize that I no longer wanted to be a smoker, and I had to remember my goals when I was in situations that I felt like I wanted to have a cigarette, right? I had to remember my goals when I was in situations that I wanted to eat the donut or the pizza or the whatever, and I had to manage myself. I had to say, okay, I'm just going to have a bite and I'm going to be done. Right? There was a conscious effort. Your dog does not have that ability. So when we ask ourselves, can my dog change, or can they learn something? Yes, they can, but you're the one that has to teach them. They're not going to learn it on their own. So the real question is, can you teach your dog? Can you take the time to break things down for them in a way that they can understand it? And will you have the patience to apply that and be consistent every day?
That's a really good way to look at it, that they don't even know that we make that up.
No idea.
And I'm sure everyone listening is like, oh, yep, I've tried to make my own health changes and that didn't work out so well. It gives us a little bit more empathy for them. Like, oh,
no,
I get
for
it.
sure.
I've been there.
It does. And and I love that, that understanding that I came to one day, thinking about my own struggles in life and bad habits that I wanted to change. And then thinking about my dogs or my clients' dogs and think, wow, and they have no idea that we're like, this sucks. They're just like, rah, 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 I'm a dog, and we're just like, that, we hate when you do that. You need to stop doing that. It's just like, what are you talking about? I've been doing it for like 5 years. What are you guys talking about? That's another thing too. Like, how long has the behavior been practiced?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, you don't want your dog to jump on you anymore, but yet you've been petting them every time they jump for the past 5 years. You know what I mean? So, and if you're going to correct them for doing it, I support that, but are you rewarding them when they don't? Or are you still rewarding them when they do? So what's the point of correcting them if tomorrow they jump on you, you're going to pet them, and the next day they jump on you and then you smack them? Not that I support smacking, but I'm just saying, like, as an example, why is it, that's not fair. That's not consistent. You're sending mixed messages.
For folks who are listening to this and they're feeling really inspired, like I am.
Hey, there we go.
Hi, guys.
Where's the dingo? Oh.
This is Brooklyn. Lotes, come here, bud. Where you at, buddy? Hi, bud.
Yay.
Say hi, speak. Speak.
Love it.
He talks a lot.
For folks who are listening and they're feeling really inspired to start incorporating these strategies, but maybe don't really know where to start, what would you kind of recommend in terms of next steps?
Yeah. Hi, buddy. So first thing I would do is I would say, try to engage more with your dog. What are the things that are valuable? And one of the easiest things we can do is use food. So take their food, put it in a food bag, and think of different ways that you can engage with them. Maybe that's something as simple in the beginning as just tossing a piece of food, letting them go run and get it, and then calling them back to you and giving them some more food, and then repeating that process. Maybe it's something as simple as taking their food and hiding it and then showing them where to go find it, and then hiding it and then letting them go find it on their own. Things like that in the house, giving them more mental stimulation by giving them like treat dispensing toys, or playing things like hide and seek with them. That would be my first recommendation on where to start, is to have your dog start to look at you and as something or someone who is more valuable. So playing with their toys instead of leaving the toys out, which is not bad, but I think that you would find your dog is more interested in you if you're the one engaging with them and that toy. And this is something I encourage all of my clients to do. And again, I don't really speak I don't label things. I try not to label things as good or bad, because it's more than that. It's not just so black and white all the time. Like growling is not a bad behavior. It's communicative. The dogs are telling you something. So we don't want to punish that, as an example. And it's not bad if you give your dogs food in a bowl, but it would be better for your relationship if you fed them by hand and engage with them more, especially if you have things that you want to teach them. So that would be the first place I start, is focusing on more engagement. If you go to the park with your dog and you really either they're on a 6-foot leash or a long line, or excuse me, a 6-foot leash or off leash, put them on a long line, right? So that you can have that control over them and you can run around with them without worrying about them running off or running after another dog because they love dogs so much. So management would be a part of that as well. So management and more engagement, mental stimulation.
For folks who feed their dogs fresh, raw, putting it in a little baggie and dispensing as you go about your day might be a little bit harder.
Yeah. I'll
Freeze
touch on
dried
that.
raw though, right?
You could do
Freeze
freeze-dried.
dried is perfect for that. Yeah. Or if you want,
freeze-dried
you
is
can
great.
use, I was going to say, you could use a gauntlet or a glove. You know, when if you're doing birds of prey, you'll have the glove on, so you can use the glove, and then that's the sting out of it.
So just funny story. When I was raising my shepherd and I started feeding her raw diet, I was like adamant. I was like, I'm never going to give her anything like processed or whatever. And at the time, I actually like carried around my food bag with raw chicken in a plastic bag in my food bag. And I remember going out like, and I had a little paper towel, like it was gross. And I look back now, I'm like, okay, you're a little crazy. So with that said, I've learned, so I've been in different phases of my life, right? So I was like a dog treat baker for a little while where I was making my own treats. But honestly, that was a lot of work. So I found freeze dried. And I have these freeze dried beef liver treats that my dogs absolutely love. And I look at it like this. I live a pretty healthy lifestyle, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy some of the taboo foods, right? And I looked at it and again, I just try to be rational. I'm like, okay, I eat pretty well, but that's not to say that I don't have some treats here and there and some, unhealthier foods. So I think it's okay if my dog has some treats that aren't the best, right? In terms of, the best. So I have a higher quality kibble that I also use for training, so that my dogs are super food motivated. So between the higher quality kibble and the beef liver, they are absolutely ecstatic whenever we do any training, whenever there's food involved. So that's how I got around that. But I would definitely be in support of like freeze dried food for anybody that wants to stay away entirely from anything that's processed.
My dog loves everything. So I get those tiny little wild blueberries frozen in a bag, and I'll give her like the tiniest little frozen blueberry. Yeah. It loves it. It's like the best treat. And it's a lot cheaper than like one of those little tiny bags of the freeze dried. I mean, we do freeze dried too, but
yeah. Also carrots are great. You can chop up some carrots. I've had clients whose dog love peas. And you can also, and I've done this too with my dogs, is I'll boil chicken and then cut up chicken. So it may not be raw, but it's still real food, and it's better than, there's some of the stuff that's out there they sell in these pet stores is absolutely terrible to give our dogs. And that's a whole other topic. But yeah, definitely we try to stay as healthy as possible on both ends for us and them.
Well, just on that note of food as well, it's really easy to overfeed when you're training. So I recommend that people consider how much is a portion size, how much is their dog supposed to get in the day, then set some of that aside as the treat, as the rewards, as the training food, so that you don't end up accidentally having a third bowl every day and then stacking that weight on.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I recommend for people to put the dog's food in a bag and feed them through training. And you can add treats in the bag. So there's kind of like this little mixture of fun stuff and surprises. And the other thing I will say that I have told my clients, and if you're in a training process with your dog and they, for a short period of time, gain a couple of pounds, it's not the end of the world. You can always taper back on that food too. So if you start to see that and it's a concern, you can always taper back. But especially with some of my clients that have strong behavioral issues that are very important and need to be taken care of. And I say to them, look, it's okay if the dog gains a little bit of weight, or if we're overfeeding them just a little bit for the sake of this training process that they need to learn. And if they're only willing to take a specific treat outside in an environment that they're typically very reactive, then it's okay. You know what I mean? And so we have to, for me, I'm all about making compromises to really help the goal, and I think that's important to mention as well.
Yeah, you always want to look at the big picture of things rather
Yeah.
than get hamstrung by rules and go, oh, I can't do that because it's breaking the rule. But okay,
Absolutely,
what's
yeah.
really going on here? Let's
Yeah.
be flexible and get a great result.
In dog training, there's so many rules, and I get people all the time. I had a client the other day that, we were working with her dog. Her previous style of training, having worked with another trainer, was a little bit more, a little bit too strict, right? A little bit more focused on, corrections. And again, I support the use of corrections, but I explained to her how, number one is we got to loosen up on the dog. Like, the dog's in a new environment. There's a lot going on. Let's focus on relaxing first, coming to the environment, let the dog adjust, and then we can sort of raise our criteria. And I said to her, I said, it's okay that the dog is making a mistake. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, thank you so much for saying that, and like giving me permission, giving the dog permission to make a mistake, because I just felt like that they shouldn't be. And I said, I know, I've been there before, but the reality is it's not fair to the dog, because they're already stimulated in this environment, and then we're telling them like you can't make any mistakes. So I think giving people the permission to make a mistake and telling them that it's okay if their dog makes mistakes and learning how to work through them is super important, because it's just, again, we're talking about health and longevity, and nobody's going to be healthy and live long and prosper if they're always stressed. And that goes for us and dogs.
Yeah.
It's a very nuanced and individualized approach.
Yes, 100%.
On the context of raw feeding, this is something you're clearly very passionate about and very knowledgeable about as well. And can you tell listeners what you're giving everyone?
Yes, I have a free raw food guide that I put together. It's pretty informative. There's about 20 pages, but don't be overwhelmed, because I cover a lot of frequently asked questions in that as well. And I encourage everyone, even after reading it, to continue to look into the topic and even get with like a holistic veterinarian or a veterinarian that supports raw feeding and a natural whole foods approach. As I like to say, to a species appropriate diet. So it's important that we recognize the benefits of feeding real food and trying to steer away from processed food as much as possible. But yeah, the raw food guide is very extensive. I also include a lot of links there to other resources, because I'm certainly not trying to be like, the one-stop shop, although it can be. I want people to learn and to actually start to venture out and look for other trainers or pet nutritionists or veterinarians that support this, because you'll start to see an overall picture that unfortunately is really frowned upon with our mainstream medical field or veterinarian field. So, and that's a whole other topic. But yeah, so I have a free raw food guide. I've been raw feeding my shepherd for 10 years. She's 10 and a half now, and I got her when she was about 9 weeks. And I knew from the moment I got her that I was going to give her the absolute best life. And that was through training and through diet and giving her everything. And she's such an amazing dog. So.
And she's very blessed to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this resource. This is really, really big. So raw feeding, we went so in depth on this during our last summit. I think we had 3 separate experts in the field talking about this. We had Thomas Sandberg, who's doing research on raw feeding and extending the lifespan of Great Danes. We had Dr. Nick Thompson, Dr. Nick Thompson, who talked about this so in depth. And we also had Dr. Connor Brady. So yes.
I have his book.
Yeah, perfect. Yes,
Yeah.
love it. So
that's awesome.
So I'm so glad you brought this up, because you're the first person who's been talking about this so far in this summit, and this is going to be a really amazing resource for folks who maybe this is a little bit newer for them, or they've kind of been dabbling and they want to get more well versed in this topic. And like you said, it's just a complete game changer. Like it is just so
it really
important.
is. Yeah, I had a client recently we met for our group class, and I was petting her dog. I'm like, your dog is so soft. And she's like, yeah, he's on a raw diet. And I'm like, of course he is, because my dogs are just as soft. And people are always so surprised. I'm like, it's just like us, right? When we're eating well and hydrating, it's like our skin feels good. It looks good. So no different. So I felt like you were going to say something, and I kind of cut in there.
No, I mean, I just, the general enthusiasm of it. I'm really excited about that. But the second piece is the RAF Wonderful. So for folks who are listening, so if you are a VIP, Antonio has offered an incredible gift that you can enter to potentially win in the raffle. Can you share what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys, if you are the winner, I'm going to offer you a 90-minute consultation through Zoom or Google Meet, or even if FaceTime if you want to, just to talk about your issues and help you get on the right track so that you can live a great life with your dog as long as possible.
Amazing. We will put all the information on how to enter the raffle in the comments here and in the Facebook group. So look for that. And can you tell us more about what you do? Folks who are listening and they're like, I need some help with this. Like, take some of the frustration and overwhelm off of me and Google, and just tell me what to do, help me understand what to do for my unique situation and, for my dog.
Yeah, well, because everyone's situation is unique and different, I do offer a lot of advice, free advice on my social media platforms. So if you check me out on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, at Leader of the Pack LV, LV stands for Las Vegas. There's lots of information you can get there. I also just recently released an online course. It's my first one, and I'm super excited about. It's my pack leadership seminar course. So I did a seminar a few months back where we talked about the fundamentals of pack leadership and what that really looks like and what a real leader is. Because I think that the word pack leader has kind of gotten some negative attention. And I completely disagree with a lot of the things that are said about leadership and being a pack leader. So I cover that really extensively in my course, and that's we turned that seminar into a course that's broken down into modules for people to digest and really start to gain control of some of their unruly and super excitable and even nervous dogs in the house, and how to apply that potentially outside as well. So that is available now, and you can check that out on our website. I believe you guys will have the link to that. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll link up all of your social media and the gift and the raffle and your course. And it sounds like you meet with folks no matter where they are, like if they wanted to do one-on-one as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of clients that are in other countries, Germany, UK, even people in Australia. So really excited to be able to extend my reach. And, we live in such a beautiful time now with social media and whatnot, and being able to collaborate with people, even like Penny and others that are in other countries.
Everything we've talked about today, it really puts it into perspective in terms of how much it improves their quality of life. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we all want, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've learned so much. And yeah, before we wrap, I'll give you kind of the microphone for a minute. Is there anything
Sure.
else that we didn't give you a chance to talk about, or that's just kind of speaking to your heart that you want to leave as a final note for folks listening?
Yeah, I'll just kind of reiterate what I've said, that one of the things that I love to teach my clients is just how to have a better relationship with their dogs, how to engage more with their dogs. And that engagement comes from finding out what it is that they love and want, and trying to give that to them in a structured way so that they learn to have a relationship that works for you as well, right? So they're not just going crazy, jumping all over you, as an example. They learn to sit and wait, just as a simple example. But yeah, take the time to engage with your dogs. I think it's great when we see our dogs running around and having fun, but oftentimes people have behavioral problems because their dogs don't look to them. There's no value in them. The people end up being like a chauffeur to the dog. Just take me to the dog park and leave me alone, and don't ask me to leave, So how can you engage more with your dog? How can you be more fun for your dog? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is by having the things that they value and giving it to them in a fun and playful way, and taking the time to focus on what it is that you want from them, rather than constantly telling them no.
Because they always want to cooperate with you, right? So let's just make it easy for them.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to figure out what to do to get what they want, and it's our job to show them what to do to get what they want.
Right.
So,
on that note, thank you again for your time and
thank
your
you.
expertise.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you all for watching, and thank you ladies so much for having me on. I cannot wait to do this again.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely be inviting you back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Take care, guys.